Okay, it's 10:30. We should get started. I'm just here to facilitate. This is a session organized by Nancy Herther, sociology librarian at University of Minnesota, on changes in the book distribution landscape. And participating are Steve Potash, president of Overdrive, Kari, Paulson, VP of Market Development at Books at ProQuest, and as she said, not just ebooks at ProQuest anymore, and Dan Tonkery, CEO of Content Strategy, and here is Nancy.
Thank you very much, and I hope you all will find places to sit here. Hopefully this is going to be a wonderful session. We've designed this so that we have wonderful people up here with great experience, but at the same time we want to know your questions. First, a note on the title. We certainly are going to be looking at all of the major sort of changes and issues that are coming up from all of the vendors. Obviously, we couldn't fit all of the vendors up here. So in planning this program, I tried to put together 3 people that I knew could do the job, and I'm hoping that for those of you out in the audience who are working with other companies that are involved with this, please feel free to join the conversation and the discussion. As Charles was saying, we're planning on cutting this off so we have a minimum of 10 minutes at the end because we really want this to be a conversation, a discussion with you. So the plot thickens when it comes to ebooks. We're hearing more and more about them. The penetration is obviously there. In the New York Times, however, not that there isn't controversy, just in September there was a big discussion and articles concerning the ebook sales slippage, the fact that the data is still a little bit bumpy. We're not seeing that continuous movement. In just a couple days ago, Simon & Schuster reported that their ebook sales are down. And the American Booksellers Association released their information, and in their information, what they found is that some of their publications are also not, the ebook versions are not doing as well. On the other hand, the American Booksellers Association has now added a Buy Now button for their IndieBound series so that it's easier for people going into the database to locate books from one of the members of the association to be able to get it right away in various versions. So it's very difficult to be able to say anything dramatic, or I shouldn't say that. It's easy to say things that are dramatic, I guess, but conclusively about ebook sales because we really don't have good statistics on this yet. There's an awfully lot of self-publishing and other things going on, and we just haven't really gotten the kind of statistical evidence that we need to really feel confident about saying things. As far as other trends going on that we're not going to cover here, but interesting because there's always something going on with ebooks. Both Poland and Germany are starting to advocate for the sale or resale of ebooks, the development of a used ebook market. And in the EU countries, that might be a little bit easier. They have a different structure than we have here. Also, about a month ago, Waterstones decided they're not going to sell the Kindle because the sales of their print books are going up so high. The Kindle hasn't been as strong, so they've decided to sort of pull that for the time being. Statistics that came out in terms of book sales for ebooks find that the majority of ebooks in the United States, approximately 75%, are still coming from Amazon. So the end-user market is still extremely important in this area. Lastly, I guess, I do want to mention some of the people that aren't up here. Amazon, obviously, is a major player. It'd be wonderful if they would be willing to come to conferences like this, but you can send them an email and they don't respond. Same thing for Alibaba, a big, huge corporation, an important corporation moving into this area, very, very deep pockets. They're not here. I want to apologize as far as EBSCO not being here to directly talk about YBP and the acquisition of that, but I hope if there are representatives here that you'll feel happy to kind of join in our conversation. I guess one last thing that I want to point out in terms of companies, again talking about the amazing importance of companies that don't usually attend this conference. The front page today of the USA Today talks about the 5 companies, and between Amazon and Alphabet, we always know it as Google, that's well over 50% of the online market these days in terms of online dollars. So there are many parts of the ebook arena that we're not able to bring to the fore here. However, I'm hoping, because again, picking wonderful people here who have experience and who have been here for a long time, I think is going to give us that depth of experience, context based on the past, but as well as give you some insight into what we all see happening. Certainly, I think we're going to be seeing a lot more internationalization. I think we already are, and again, you'll be hearing about that. We're going to start with Steve Potash. And he's another long-timer in the CD-ROM and even other sorts of areas going back to the 1980s, as I do. Overdrive is definitely the leading digital content provider and has certainly not only announced a lot of global expansion back at the Frankfurt book show, a lot of global expansion with some of their institutional buyers, and they're now in more than 50 countries, which is pretty amazing. And they're offering content in 50 languages. So they're doing very, very well. Steve has been head of Overdrive from the beginning. He still is. And recently, the big news, of course, that bodes well for the future, especially for that internationalization, is the fact that they were purchased by Rakuten, which is a major Japanese firm. He will be our first speaker today, talking about what he sees for the industry and for what's happening. I'm going to give the other introductions as well, kind of starting out here rather than bopping back and forth. As you can see, we only had room for 3 people here. And the next person who's going to be speaking is Kari Paulson, and she's also a relative newcomer from the standpoint of some of us, but when it comes to ebooks, she's been around for a long time. She's a founding member of EBL, started working with ebooks in 1998, back when it was in Australia. And she moved to San Francisco with the acquisition of the company by ProQuest. So she's now a vice president of market development for books with ProQuest. And ProQuest, of course, also has eBury. And they've been making some other very interesting corporate announcements in the last few months that, again, point to a lot of not just stability, but certainly a lot of positive, optimistic options for the future. So I'm very happy that she's been able to join us. The last speaker is somebody else who's been involved in ebooks, going back to the floppy disk era and so on, is Dan Tonkery. And Dan has been a librarian for 45 years. Most of his career involved the automation of technical services. Then he shifted to the commercial world, working with the National Library of Medicine, UCLA Library. He was the AUL for technical services. He's run different companies as president or CEO, but for the last 7 years, he's been the president of Content Strategies. And he works with a variety of different companies, individuals, firms, venture capital, and others, as well as large libraries. And he is someone who has been graced with a lot of wisdom when it comes to what's happening with books and certainly with ebooks and with the ebook industry. So I'm going to turn this over to Steve Potash, and I hope that you remember that at the end I'm going to be sitting in the front row to make sure that everybody stays pretty much on time here, because we really want your input and your questions and your insights in terms of where the industry of ebooks is going and taking us. So thank you for coming, and Steve?
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you again, Nancy. And I'm delighted to be here. And as most of you know, Overdrive is best known for the success we've had listening to public librarians and delivering what they've asked for what your communities, what your readers want. Let me just, so I don't have to give too much background on Overdrive, who in the audience has either had experience through a public library or school with Overdrive's product? Thank you. Okay, so we'll just go fast. What you may not know, though, is in addition to the 93% of the North American public libraries we serve, our fastest growth is in education. Now, we tackled K-12 first, because of the need and helping how public librarians are helping parents and teachers and their communities. And as a result of that, over the last 2-3 years, our collection and our services and our tools and the access models are now giving us a wherewithal to start coming back into higher ed and academic, a market which today we serve. We serve hundreds of universities and research and national libraries all over the globe. And I'm excited to be here at the Charleston conference to meet with the academic publishers and talk to some of the universities who are looking to supplement your online databases and journals with every other kind of book with one purpose in mind: go where the readers are and mobile first. This is kind of what's driving. Without talking too much about what Overdrive's doing, when Nancy asked me to focus my comments on one or two areas, looking at the topic of the session, let's talk about two big trends and where the market's going. For ebooks, it has to be, number one, a proliferation of new access models for content. Overdrive set up our B2B marketplace, Overdrive Marketplace, for librarians and teachers and educators and corporate knowledge centers to acquire permission for copyrighted digital books, digital audio books, streaming video, magazines, newspapers. And it primarily started by evangelizing to the publishers and the rights holders under our most popular model, one book, one user. I will say we now have hundreds of publishers that permit simultaneous access. In the school model, for the school market, we now have major trade, educational, academic publishers giving us what I call classroom sets. So bulk discounts, so every student for the quarter, for the semester, for the school year have their own copy. We are now proliferating what we call book club model. So if everybody reads, or city reads, or mayor's book club, we want low-cost simultaneous access. This, we also are live now with, we call it CPC, cost per checkout. So it's pay as you go. We've done that with the Hollywood studios because we have to pay on every view. We are now with patron-driven acquisition. In the public library, we call it recommend to library and let the librarian mediate whether they want to add these titles or not. So this is one of the most exciting trends, and I can tell you, now that we've had most of the trade market and of course the educational and academic markets know digital books in public and academic and school libraries increases their brand, their value proposition, helps reinforce print sales and other content. We are now evangelizing you should make your content available under any model the buyer wants. So it's really exciting that I have some publishers that didn't even allow library lending 5 years ago, and now some of their best-selling imprints and titles you can buy under 3 or 4 different options. We're just saying, give the customers more ways to buy your products, you will sell more, whether it's here or abroad. Access model is great. And by the way, just to mention, we're very proud that we're learning some of the academic and research and professional markets. 3 years ago, we signed an agreement with LexisNexis, and Overdrive is now in almost every court system, law firm, law school. I was just at Harvard Law School Library, and Overdrive just has a very simple way of going forward. We ask our customers, we ask our librarians, how do you want it to work? And this is something that has, kind of driven our evangelizing the flexible content models and improving the user experience. And when Nancy talked about the landscape, the big 3 or 4 that are making the markets, Google, Amazon, Apple, and who else did you mention? Microsoft. Let's throw them in for good measure. I'm proud to say, because this is where people work and live and play, if you go to Bing.com and search for our book, Sycamore Row book, above the fold, because Overdrive also believes in open industry standards, we helped invent and popularize now the EPUB file format. We are very big fans of HTML5. And at developer.overdrive.com, your library, your institution, or your vendors can get no-cost open APIs. So Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and who is the fourth? Apple. We are either partnering with them for deep integration so their users can discover and utilize library and research materials on their native devices, or partnering with them with apps and the Chromebooks as they go around the world into classroom. The second topic that Nancy suggested, and especially as a result of the change of ownership we enjoyed earlier this year, and that wasn't the first time. I was, 5 years ago, Overdrive was fortunate enough to have a private equity fund invest in us. But with the private equity fund, they have kind of a 3 to 4 year window. So we were in our 4th year. We were always profitable, growing great, but it was time for them to go. Don't repeat this. They're wonderful people. So when you get to a strategic partner like Rakuten, who's one of the global leaders in e-commerce, and they have a visionary founder and CEO, Mikitani Hiroshi, they have just provided us the long-term capability based on their pillars of digital content. And they own a variety of streaming video companies around the world and digital book assets, and has helped accelerate our ability to aggregate content and enter some new markets. But even before the recent transaction, we were very fortunate that we developed from day one a vision that we don't know what the business model will be. We don't know what the container that we will read the books in, so we have to develop multilingual, multi-currency, open systems. And I'm proud to say the fastest growing areas of content for us are non-English materials into the U.S. library. You go to San Francisco Public Library, they have 10,000 simultaneous release Chinese ebooks for readers of all ages. And Overdrive is selling English language material worldwide into institutions, international schools, national libraries. It couldn't be a more exciting time to bring digital content, premium digital content, enhanced digital content. With the new EPUB 3 standard now, we are doing with one click, without an app, synchronized children's book or language learning with the words highlighting and the pages turning, engaging readers who want to learn a language, or for young children, or supporting literacy campaigns. I can mention some of my favorites, but many of them are very silly. But we do also have Superman and Avengers and Frozen from Disney. We're excited about reading for all readers, all ages. And it's that instant access and gratification that we're excited to bring to higher ed and academic markets. I will also just quickly mention that Overdrive has been extraordinarily proud to be partnering with the ALA in their campaign, Libraries Transform. Under the leadership of the current ALA president, Sari Feldman, she has set forth a vision and a mission for all divisions of ALA to reimagine and challenge ourselves to deliver value to our communities, value to our readers, and I'm very proud to be working directly with ALA and many of their divisions and supporting Sari's vision there. I'm done. I'm going to keep under budget here on my time, Nancy, and look forward to questions or a chance to chat afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Hello, everyone. One thing, when I found out I was going to be participating on a panel with Steve Potash, I thought, great, because Steve and I are fellow travelers in the ebook, and we actually were previously partners, our companies, when I worked for ebooks.com, which is where EBL was developed out of in Australia, way back when. We worked with Overdrive as a wholesaler. So they supplied some of the ebooks we sold in the retail space. And so we've sort of known each other and continue to bump into each other along the way over many, many years. And it's really interesting to be standing here right now, sort of where we are today. And I don't know that either one of us could have anticipated that this is where we would be at this point in time. So it is. I was thinking about it as I was sitting here, how fun it's been to sort of be involved in ebooks in their nascence and be here today, seeing the things that are happening. At ProQuest, for example, who would have ever thought that the ebook companies would be buying the print companies? It was unthinkable in the days that we were starting. And you can forget how fun it is on a daily basis, but it really is exciting to be a part of this evolution. So I'll talk a little bit about ProQuest and our acquisitions. And I know there are many acquisitions, or not many, but some recent acquisitions that don't have to do with books. So I'm not going to focus on those. My focus is really going to be on what we're doing in the book space and some of what's driving that. But I can say, as somebody who's come into ProQuest as a recently acquired business, that I do understand the drivers for why ProQuest acquires the companies we do. We do have a primary mission to empower researchers and enable them to reach superior outcomes. And the primary way we do that is by focusing the institutions that serve these researchers. And we're continually scanning the landscape in our services, in our products, and in what libraries are asking for to identify the gaps. And that certainly has been a primary driver when it's come to books or ebooks. So in early 2011, for those of you who don't know the progression of the ebooks and books acquisitions at ProQuest, ProQuest acquired eBury. And eBury at the time was one of our as EBL, one of our primary competitors. And I remember at the time thinking, oh my God, it's over. We might as well all just go home. Stop, put our tools down. It's all going to be over. But of course that didn't happen. We continued to work in slightly different ways, and we had different strengths. In early 2013, ProQuest then acquired EBL. One of the primary drivers for acquiring EBL, while ProQuest already had an ebook platform, eBury, was that we had different strengths, and we had developed some different products, different access models, and different functionality that were really complementary to each other. And by bringing them together, I think it was identified that we could have a much stronger offering for libraries. We also had some geographical differences. So as a company that had grown out of Australia, EBL certainly had strengths in North America, but we were particularly strong in Europe and the UK and Australia and Australasian market. So it really was a nice complementary fit for ProQuest to be able to expand its support and services in all the regions it was operating in. So as a part of that acquisition, we've been bringing these two products together. I can also say that the reason that ProQuest bought these multiple book companies or ebook companies has not been just a market play. If it were, what you'd see is getting rid of the company that they bought, those people, just bringing those products in and not necessarily bringing in the diversity of different functions. What we've seen instead, or what we've done instead, is I as the president of EBL, was actually brought in as the GM of the ebooks group at ProQuest, and my role was to help bring eBury and EBL together, and I'm still obviously involved in that process. But we also kept the development team, the sales team, the account managers, and created roles. So there wasn't a single person who left or was let go as a part of that process. And that I can say is a consistent pattern that I've seen with ProQuest and the acquisitions. It really is about expanding functionality and filling those gaps. So in early this year, 2015, ProQuest acquired Coots. So with Coots, that's the print business and my library. So now 3 ebook businesses and a print business. And, to some people it may be a head scratcher as we're watching this transition from print to e. Why would an e-business buy a print business? But I think, and we've obviously seen this with some of our peers in the marketplace, with EBSCO and YBP. What was the driver for this? I can tell you that the primary driver was to fill the gaps that we were hearing from our customers, the gaps that we were feeling in terms of the solutions we needed to provide. And I think the reason why, there was a point in time where we used to sort of, back at EBL, think, oh, wouldn't it be awesome if we could go buy a print company. Wouldn't that just turn the industry on its head and be so shocking? Of course, it was, really out of reach at the time. But I think as we are progressing in this transition to E to P to E, we are hitting more of an inflection point where these gaps in workflow, really what's happened, especially in the academic library space, is ebooks have kind of been rammed into a print workflow as best they could. The being able to see what's here or there, it's gotten quite complex and complicated. And we're at a point, when we look at journals, we don't talk about e-journals and print journals so much the way we did, 5-10 years ago. We talk about journals. I think we're starting to get to that point with books, and there's a need for a more consolidated acquisition, selection, discovery, management workflow. That was the primary driver for the acquisition. And we've also got to a point, I think, where, the print companies were previously buying the e-companies. The e-companies are now buying the print companies because at ProQuest, we had on our strategic roadmap a plan to build out a number of workflow solutions that we knew were missing and needed to be filled. There was the option to do that organically and slowly over time. We were and continue to partner with other companies to build those solutions between our companies. But we found that it would be a much faster route to market to be able to acquire a company like Coutts and work together really under the covers to bring these solutions together. We also, with Coutts, saw it as an opportunity, again, to really invest in those geographical strengths that we had, especially in the markets like the UK and Europe, where Coutts is a very strong print supplier. So back to that question of partnerships, although we have acquired multiple companies, and as a part of our strategy to bring the right solutions, that isn't at the expense of our partnerships. So we are continuing, and we believe that partnerships are still an imperative in terms of bringing the right solutions to you as a community and as our customers. And so we continue to partner with YBP, OCLC, all of the places that you are asking us to, all of the vendors and suppliers you are asking us to work with to ensure that what you're doing in your library, you're able to still have a seamless and satisfactory workflow. So I think those are the primary things I wanted to cover. I know we want to have a lot of questions. But one other point, and I know this has come up, the question about, well, what about competition? There's a lot of consolidation. I know there's a lot of concern in the marketplace around the rapid nature of some of the acquisitions we've seen. We see it in publishing houses, the smaller publishers, and this was talked about by Taylor and Francis in our session yesterday. Some of the smaller publishing houses are not in a position to invest, and so, they're at a point in time where they're willing to be acquired by some of the bigger publishing companies. When I look around and I see, that while there's consolidation and I shouldn't even use the word consolidation, but there is some merging of companies and services, it opens the door and it creates a gap for other companies at the edges to step in. And I think we've seen that a little bit with ebooks, where we have JSTOR and Muse and some of these other companies stepping up and becoming a larger part. We're hearing more and more of libraries talking about them as platforms and solutions. So there is a bit of an organic process involved, and I hope that more small companies continue to come in, drive some innovation, and keep it a diverse marketplace. One final comment. Sorry, I said the last comment was the final one. But there's also, as I was thinking about, this E and P acquisitions, as print sales are declining and e-sales are growing, there is, for all of us, it's beneficial that the upside of E is still being invested back into the PE workflow and support for those formats, because we had primarily had our workflows driven by the print suppliers and the print workflow solutions. As print declines, the ability to invest in building out increasing numbers of increasing amount of workflow solutions for electronic becomes more difficult. So with the combination of E&P under the same company, we're able to continue to invest that upside back into a more holistic workflow across books in general. Thank you.
Well, good morning. My presentation is perhaps a little different. I'm not going to tell you about the great features of the company that I have or anything like that. I'm going to talk a little more about numbers. So if you don't like numbers, you can go ahead and fall asleep right now and will not disturb me. I've been in this business for 45 years, and for 15 of those years, I was a librarian. I was a real card-carrying librarian. I worked 10 years National Library of Medicine. I worked at UCLA. And then I fell off the wagon and I went to the dark side. And the last 30 years of my career has gotten darker and darker and darker. And, there's a group of people, I don't know, and none of you probably know any of these people, who work in the shadows of our industry. They're the people who buy and sell the companies for the companies that we're talking to. And, they don't get up at a meeting, and I've seen probably 10 of them at this meeting. They're the people who are running around talking in the corners. They're the people who are having private meetings in rooms. You never see them. You don't know who they are. But that's the group that somehow I've fallen in with, The thieves, I don't know what you want to, horse traders, anything you want to call them is probably, just as long as you don't ever mention their name. And so, consolidation in the book industry or any serial publishing has gone on for many years. The historical trend was subscription agents bought other subscription agents, book vendors bought book vendors, and publishers bought publishers. And that's the way we've operated for the last 30 or 40 years. And then there's been a change in our community, and I think that change is the one that many of you may not even recognize or what's going on. You may have heard their names. And I think that the consolidation now that you see out there is not being driven by the market. It is being driven by a very select group of venture firms. This is venture plays. This is not, I can tell you almost with certainty that EBSCO didn't wake up one morning and say, oh, Jesus, we should buy Yankee today. It didn't happen that way, okay? What happened, Baker & Taylor in 2006 was bought by Castle Harlan Partners, and they paid $455 million in 2006. They expected great things. They thought, this was the, and Baker & Taylor had been owned by 4 other venture firms, and they keep, $100 million sells to one who for 200, and then the 200 sell. Anyhow, Castle Harlan, and their great wisdom, paid $455 million for something that didn't even have the lipstick on the pit bull, They sort of looked at the tail and thought, well, that's a nice ass, And so, they paid $466 million for something that probably wasn't worth half that. So, Christ, what do? Okay, for 2 years, they took this pony around and tried to sell it. I mean, they dressed it up, they made, put new coloring, they colored in some of the dark spots, hoping that they could find a buyer for this thing called Yankee. And God, there were multiple people bid, and sure enough, EBSCO won the bid. Now, why would EBSCO pay a shitload of money, in my world, for something that probably wasn't quite worth all of that? They bought that because believe it or not, Yankee holds, and we're talking about academic market, not the school and public library. Forget that market. That's not a market that I pay attention to. 84% of the U.S. market, academic market, is controlled by Yankee. Good deal. So, but in the end of the day, Yankee generates a significant amount of money and pays back half the investment that Castle Harlan has paid. So, okay, they're feeling a whole lot better now because now they only have a couple $100 million invested in Baker and Taylor instead of $500 million. So that works well. Well, as soon as that happens, ProQuest is not dead yet. They decide that, oh, Christ, Coots would be a good fit for us. Oh, man, that's really good. Well, it only has about 15% of the market. I'm not sure what you can do with it one way or another. And the people at Ingram and Nashville, when they put that on the loading dock and shut the door and held their breath, hoping, my God, someone's taking it off our hands. It was exciting. So anyhow, we get into the ebook world. We've been talking about the big players. Nobody says 75% of the ebook revenue in the United States is controlled directly by the publishers. Not eBay, not Yankee, not, anybody else. Just understand it, 75%. In some cases, it's higher than that. Of the total ebook sales are controlled directly by the publisher. And that number seems to be increasing. Part of the reason, I think, is, number one, better price, and number two, often DRM free. So I thought, gee, I surveyed 15 of the large STM publishers to get their numbers, and it actually went from 60% to 85%. So 75 is sort of like a ballpark number. But, you talk to a Springer sales rep, or you talk to an Elsevier sales rep, and you say, what are you selling today? And they'll say, well, everybody has the journals, but we're selling a lot of ebooks. And I said, well, how are you selling those? Well, direct. That is a direct sale. So all these other companies, and you worry about the big three or whatever it is, are dealing with less than 20% of the market. And then you'll find out that if you talk to some of the big science publishers, they don't even make their entire list available to aggregators. And it's like, you have to call the publisher and say, okay, I want these books. Okay, you can have these books, but these three you have to buy through an aggregator. So, it's a little crazy, but everybody's fighting over this very tiny portion of the market. And I think and I'm not sure that that's going to change, except to have more stuff go to the publishers. And then, what you also see is that Amazon is not asleep at the wheel. And so Amazon is gradually ranking up their library sales. And you'll see that if you talk to the university presses, 40% of the university presses today, sales are through Amazon. And their largest ebook format is Kindle. So there's a tremendous amount of and several of the large, and I'm not talking about Oxford and Cambridge because those are really not university presses in what we consider a university press. I'm talking about places like California or Michigan or Rutgers or whoever else. 40% of the sales through Amazon, with an increasing, it's almost to the point where academic libraries are no longer the principal sales channel for university press. Okay? So anyhow, as I said, I'm more about the numbers, and I think from my standpoint, I'll just end it up by saying that I think that many of the recent acquisitions that the venture guys have sold, and it's the venture guys selling. Baker and Taylor never saw a dime of the money for Yankee. It went right to the venture guys. And it's the same thing with many of the others. The prices are just outlandish. I mean, they are really crazy prices. And whether it's Ex Libris and the 500 million, or whether it's other companies, I think that the venture guys are driving up the numbers to the point that there's not going to be money for development, and the library community is the one that's going to suffer from that, because you've got to, if you've been bought by a venture firm, there are certain expectations, and they expect a certain delivery of number, or the people, I mean, they change people like, people change underwear. I mean, you're gone. You don't hit your numbers. And so, it's a very ruthless business, and the money for development is what that's what you need as a library community. That money gets strangleholded, and so because you paid too much, you can't put money in development, and it ends up making your life worse. And on that bombshell.
Hi, Mark Eddington from the Amherst College Press and from Lever Press. I have what might be, thanks Charles, a somewhat heretical question. I'm a publisher of open access work. The ebooks that we publish are available for free. How do we get them in your channel so that librarians know about them?
Come talk to us. I think, well, open access for ebooks and how we make them distributable through an aggregated service, for example. I think there are still a lot of questions. We're still trying to figure that out. So we would certainly like to be able to play a role in making open access more accessible, and in applying the workflow solutions that we're talking about are so important to libraries, and a primary driving factor in the things we're doing. So we haven't figured it out yet. I don't know as a community we've figured this out yet. So we are, Charles, I know we've just been talking with you in more detail about how we might do this. So come talk to us.
Okay, other questions? Sorry, Steve.
We enable all of our institutions to upload at no cost what we call local content, their own journals, digitized work. Find a customer who wants your books, tell them to upload it. They can then point to it to other libraries. We want librarians to select and curate the material they want. We're more focused on the copyrighted premium ones that the libraries are asking for.
Hi, this is Barbara Cockrell from Western Michigan University. Kari, I have to say, I was hoping that your involvement with print might mean that we might finally get patron-driven acquisition of print materials. I've been asking for that for a long while, it feels like. So can you comment?
I can. Coots does offer a service for patron-driven acquisition for print, and there are a handful of libraries who use that service. What we've talked about between our businesses now is how we might streamline that with electronic. So, right, quite often there's a print PDA and there's an e-PDA, and how we might exploit the interfaces we have that interact with the patrons, again, around making that workflow more streamlined and making those services quicker. So come talk to us again.
Marina Chilov, Health Sciences Library, Columbia University. What is I'm asking the ProQuest, what is the perspective of aggregators working with preservation services like Portica, Project Muse?
Very good question, and it's one that we continue to grapple with because I think as an industry we don't have a really viable practical solution for archiving for ebooks. We have a dark archive, which doesn't necessarily speak to an issue where somebody like an aggregator would no longer be servicing books. So, for example, if we were Sweats and what happened to Sweats happened to us or happened to EBSCO or happened to any of the other ebook suppliers, it's not the same trigger mechanism that releases that book in a way that it would if I were the publisher. So we've been talking with Portico for quite some time. Interestingly, we just had a session at Frankfurt Book Fair where we partnered alongside Dawson Books and some of the other book suppliers. I think EBSCO was invited to that meeting. We had about 20 different publishers. It was a roundtable around how we might look as an industry to organize ourselves to find a better practical solution so that in the event of a sweat somewhere down the line, nobody's left holding the baby. So it's still work in progress, but and we still have a way to go before I think we've got a really viable archiving solution for books.
So yes, so one more question we have time for. Let's put that up. But not seeing it.
There's lots of them. I don't know that that's necessarily true. I think the relationship between our companies has become more complex. I found myself describing this in a customer meeting. It's a little bit like the parents have divorced, but you still have the kids, and that's in terms of we need to do as companies who interact, whose services and products interact with each other. We need to be good partners to each other in the areas that we do partner. And we've been working to build out a more comprehensive data sharing agreement with them. We continue to work very closely with YBP, who is now an EBSCO product. So, I think maybe there's been a sense of additional friction between the companies. I don't think that friction actually exists, but I do think the changes have meant we've got to kind of rethink how are we both competitors and partners, and how do we do that in a way that doesn't have the customers don't have to sense any difference. So we have certainly are committed to our partnering with EBSCO in the places that we need to, and I think they would say the same.
Well, I want to thank our speakers, and I especially want to thank all of you. When I conceived this program, they asked you how much time you wanted, and I said, an hour and a half. And I only got 45 minutes, and I apologize for that. I think this is a larger topic, and I'll have to work on them for next year. But thank you all very much for coming, and go forward, ebooks. Thank you.